Wade Holloway rode onto the Brennan Ranch when the sun was still a red promise behind the mountains. 20 years since he'd left this place. 20 years of cattle drives and empty promises to himself that he'd come back when he had something to show for it. The windmill squeaked in the morning wind. A horse snorted from the breaking corral. And there she was. Nora stood in the center ring with a wild Mustang rope in her scarred hands, moving like her father had taught them both when they were children who thought forever was a guarantee. Then Wade saw it, nailed to the barn door like a wanted poster. Foreclosure notice. 90 days. She turned, saw him. Her face went hard. "You came back now," her voice carried across the yard. "To watch the spectacle?" Wade dismounted slow. "I came back to keep a promise, Nora." She dropped the rope. Wade had imagined this moment 1,000 times on cold trail nights. None of those imaginings included a foreclosure notice or the way Nora's hands looked now, rough as bark, scarred from rope burns and hard work. She didn't move toward him, just stood there in the corral dust with the Mustang stamping nervous behind her. Nora Lee, the childhood name came out before he could stop it. Her jaw tightened. 20 years is a long time to remember a name, Wade Holloway. Some things a man doesn't forget, and some things, she said, a man shouldn't bother remembering. Movement at the barn. A black woman in her 50s stepped into the light, hand resting on a pitchfork, watching. Wade recognized the protective stance even if he didn't recognize the woman. "Pearl Washington," Nora said without turning. "My only hand left. Pearl, this is Wade. He used to live here. Long time ago." Pearl nodded once, said nothing. Her eyes measured him the way you'd measure a horse at auction, looking for signs of lameness, rot, things that didn't show until it was too late. Wade tied his bay to the corral rail. When he pulled his canteen from the saddlebag, his father's branding iron shifted into view, the LH mark worn smooth from years of use. He saw Nora notice it, saw something flicker across her face before she shuddered it away. "Your father taught me to use that iron," Wade said. "Before we left, said a man's brand is his word made permanent. My father taught a lot of things." Nora climbed over the corral fence, boots hitting the ground with a thud. "Didn't teach me how to stop a bank from taking everything he built." The smell of sage came on the wind. Somewhere, a meadowlark called. The same sound that used to wake them when they'd sleep in the hayloft, planning adventures they thought would last forever. "How much do you owe?" "That's none of your concern." "How much, Nora?" She started walking toward the house. $3,000, due in 90 days. Might as well be $3 million for all the chance I have of paying it. Wade followed. Pearl followed Wade, still carrying that pitchfork. The kitchen smelled like coffee and lye soap. Nora's attempt at breakfast sat congealed in a pan on the stove. Eggs burned black at the edges, bacon that looked like leather. His Nora had never been much of a cook. She poured coffee into 2 tin cups. Her hands shook slightly. She gripped the cups harder to hide it. "I'll pay it," Wade said. Nora laughed, sharp and bitter. "Sure you will. With what? Good intentions and trail dust?" Wade set his saddlebag on the kitchen table. The leather was dark with age and weather, scarred from years of use. He unbuckled it slow, pulled out 3 canvas sacks. The first one landed heavy. Gold eagles clinked inside. The second one made the table creak. The third one made Nora set down her coffee cup. $1,000 in each sack, Wade said. $3,000 total. Every cent I've saved from 8 years of trail boss wages and cattle sales. Every cent I own in this world. Pearl whistled low. Lord have mercy. Nora stared at the sacks like they might vanish if she blinked. Her fingers moved toward them, stopped, moved again, finally touched the canvas. Her work-roughened hands looked strange against the clean fabric, like she was something dirty touching something pure. "Why?" The word came out barely a whisper. "Why now?" Wade sat down across from her. The chair scraped against the floor. The same chair he'd sat in as a boy, sneaking cookies Lyle's wife used to make before the fever took her. "Your father came to Wyoming 3 years ago," Wade said. "Didn't tell you, did he?" Nora shook her head. "He was dying already. Knew it. Made the trip anyway because he wanted to see me one last time. To tell me something." The coffee sat steaming between them. Neither of them drank. "He told me he'd taken a bad deal on a cattle sale, lost money. Said he did it to buy me time to make something of myself before I came back. Said he didn't want you marrying a broke cowhand with nothing but dreams." Nora's eyes were bright now, wet. "Last thing he said to me, Keep your promise to my girl, Wade. She's going to need you, and you're going to need her, even if you don't know it yet. Pearl had set the pitchfork down. She stood by the stove with her arms crossed, watching Nora like she was watching something fragile. He died ashamed, Nora said, thinking he'd failed. He died knowing I'd keep my word. Wade pushed the sacks across the table. He didn't fail, and neither will you. Nora reached out. Her fingers traced the tied rope on the first sack. The gold coins shifted inside with a sound like promises. Because your father made me swear it. The Bitterroot Bank sat between the land office and the railroad company's territorial headquarters, 3 brick buildings in a row like soldiers standing guard. Wade noticed the arrangement as they hitched the horses, noticed how the bank's windows faced the railroad office, noticed how the banker could see who came and went without turning his head. Details like that kept a man alive on the trail. Inside, the bank smelled like furniture polish and something sweeter. Cologne, maybe. The kind that costs more than a working man makes in a month. Banker Walsh sat behind a mahogany desk that gleamed in the lamplight. He was 50, soft around the middle, with spectacles that caught the light when he looked up. His smile was practiced, professional. Miss Brennan, what a pleasant surprise. Mr. Walsh, Nora's voice was steady. I've come to settle my father's debt. Walsh's smile flickered, just for a second. I see. Well, let's review the terms, shall we? The note is for $3,000, due in, he consulted his ledger, 87 days now. I'm aware of the terms. Nora gestured to Wade. This is Wade Holloway. He's helping me settle the account today. Wade set his saddlebag on the desk. The leather made a heavy sound against the polished wood. He unbuckled it slow, watching Walsh's face. The banker's eyes widened slightly when Wade pulled out the first canvas sack. $1,000 in gold eagles, Wade said. He untied the rope, poured the coins onto the desk in a bright cascade. The metallic clink echoed through the quiet bank. Walsh swallowed. His hand moved toward the coins, stopped, withdrew. He glanced toward the window. Quick, nervous. Wade poured the second sack, then the third. The coins made a pile that caught the light like a promise made real. $3,000 in government gold. Count it, Wade said. Walsh's hands shook as he reached for the coins. He sorted them into stacks, his lips moving as he counted, the scratch of gold against wood, the tick of the wall clock. Outside, a wagon rumbled past. It's all here, Walsh said finally. $3,000 exactly. Then we're settled? Nora's voice had an edge now, relief mixed with something harder. I'll take the deed. Walsh set down the last coin. His finger left a smudge on the gold. He coughed, a wet, nervous sound. I'm afraid I need to consult the ledger more carefully. Recent developments may have affected the loan terms. What developments? Wade leaned forward. The desk creaked. The property valuation. There's been a question raised about the door opened. A man walked in like he owned the place. 50 years old, maybe more, wearing a suit that cost more than Wade's horse. His boots were polished to a mirror shine. He carried a leather portfolio under one arm. Ah, Mr. Gant, Walsh said. The relief in his voice was palpable. Perfect timing. Silas Gant smiled. It didn't reach his eyes. Miss Brennan, I was hoping to speak with you before you made any premature financial decisions. Who the hell are you? Wade asked. Silas Gant, land agent for the Montana and Northern Railroad. He set his portfolio on the desk, pushing aside some of the gold coins. They clinked together. And you are? The man paying her debt? Ah, how noble. Gant opened his portfolio, pulled out a rolled document. Unfortunately, there's been a complication. A recent survey of the Brennan property revealed some discrepancies. He unrolled the map. It was new, the paper crisp, the ink still sharp. Wade could smell it, fresh ink and expensive paper stock. According to our 1889 survey, Gant said, tapping the map, the primary water source for the Brennan Ranch, the creek headwaters, is actually located on railroad easement land, which means Miss Brennan has been drawing water from property she doesn't own. Nora grabbed the edge of the desk. Her knuckles went white. That's a lie. That creek has been on our land since my father filed his claim in 1869. Perhaps he believed that. Gant's voice was patient, condescending, like explaining something to a child. But our surveyors have confirmed the true boundary. The water rights belong to the railroad. Wade felt heat rising in his chest. So you're saying her property is worthless without water? I'm saying the bank has legitimate concerns about the collateral securing the loan. Gant looked at Walsh. Isn't that correct? Walsh wouldn't meet Nora's eyes. Given the uncertainty about the water rights, I'm afraid I must call the full note due immediately. Not 90 days, 30 days. You can't do that. Nora's voice shook now. We have the money. Right here. $3,000. The loan agreement includes a property valuation clause, Walsh said. His collar looked too tight. Sweat beaded at his temples despite the cool morning. If the collateral value falls below the loan amount, the bank has the right to steal her land. Wade's hand moved to his belt, not toward a gun, he wasn't wearing one, but the gesture was clear. Gant smiled wider. I'd be careful with accusations, Mr. Holloway. The law is quite clear on these matters, as is our survey. He tapped the map again. 30 days, Miss Brennan. I suggest you use that time to consider the railroad's offer to purchase your property. We're prepared to be generous. $500 for the ranch and buildings. You could start fresh somewhere else. 500? Nora laughed, sharp and bitter. My father put 30 years into that land. Your father, Gant said softly, is dead, and dead men don't need ranches. Wade's hand closed around the edge of the desk. The wood creaked. Pearl, standing silent by the door until now, moved forward, put a hand on Wade's arm. Gant rolled up his map, tucked it back in his portfolio. 30 days, Miss Brennan. The money's here if you change your mind. He nodded to Walsh, walked toward the door, paused, looked back. Oh, and Mr. Holloway? That's a fine pile of gold you brought. Shame it's not enough to buy water rights. He touched the brim of his hat. Good day. The door closed behind him. Through the window, Wade watched Gant cross the street, walk directly into the railroad office, not even trying to hide it. Walsh cleared his throat. I'm sorry, Miss Brennan. Truly, but my hands are tied. The note is due in 30 days, and without clear water rights. Keep your apologies, Nora said. She turned, walked out. Pearl followed. Wade looked at the pile of gold still sitting on the desk. $3,000. Every cent he owned. Not enough. Not anymore. Sunday morning came with clouds building over the mountains. The church was a canvas tent on the edge of town. Father Dermot Quinn rode circuit through 3 counties, and permanent buildings hadn't caught up with his route yet. Wade walked beside Nora and Pearl. The congregation was already gathering, 40 people, maybe more. Families Wade didn't recognize, a few faces he did. Older now, weathered by 20 years of Montana weather. They saw Nora coming. Wade watched them turn away. Mothers pulled children closer. Men found something fascinating about their boots. By the time they reached the tent entrance, a space had cleared around them like they carried plague. Pearl's jaw tightened. Same as last week, and the week before. They're afraid, Nora said quietly. Railroad employs half this town. Can't blame them for wanting to keep their jobs. Can blame them for being cowards, Pearl muttered. Inside, the tent smelled like canvas and damp earth. The benches were rough-cut pine. A simple wooden cross stood at the front, and behind it, Father Dermot Quinn arranged his service items with the careful precision of a man who'd done this 1,000 times in 100 different places. He looked up when they entered. 55 years old, Irish immigrant with hands that looked like they'd done hard labor before they'd ever held a Bible. His eyes were kind, tired, the kind of tired that comes from hearing too many confessions and being able to absolve too few. Miss Brennan, he said. His accent still carried County Cork after 30 years in America. Mr. Washington, and you must be the gentleman I've been hearing about. Wade Holloway, Father. They shook hands. The priest's grip was firm, honest. Walk with me a moment, Mr. Holloway, Father Dermot said, before service begins. Outside, the wind had picked up. The canvas tent snapped and rippled. Father Dermot pulled his coat tighter and led Wade away from the congregation. You're trying to help her, the priest said. Not a question. Trying. The bank refused your money. Word traveled fast in small towns. Wade nodded. Father Dermot was quiet for a moment, watching the clouds build. There's an old surveyor in town, Augustus Yates. Used to work for the railroad, years back. Now he drinks to forget something heavy. Forget what? That's between him and God. The priest looked at Wade. But a man who drinks that hard is usually running from his own conscience. And a guilty conscience sometimes wants to confess, if it finds the right listener. You think he knows something about that survey? I think, Father Dermot said carefully, "that confession is sacred, but some truths want to be told, Mr. Holloway. Some truths push their way out no matter how much whiskey a man pours over them." The church bell rang, a handbell, small and tinny in the morning air. "Find him," the priest said. "Listen, sometimes that's all a guilty man needs, someone willing to hear the truth." Wade started to thank him, but Father Dermot was already walking back toward the tent. The Brennan Ranch house was quiet that afternoon. Pearl had gone to check fence lines. Nora sat at the kitchen table, staring at nothing. Wade made coffee. His coffee, not hers, drinkable. "Your father kept records," he said, "of the land claim, the original survey." "He did. I'd like to see them." Nora didn't move for a long moment. Then she stood, walked to a shelf near the window where a worn Bible sat between two bookends shaped like horses. She lifted the Bible carefully, heavy, old. The leather cover was cracked and water-stained. She set it on the table, opened it. The spine creaked, a sound like old doors opening. Between the pages of Psalms, pressed flat by 20 years of weight, was a folded map. The paper crackled as Nora unfolded it, yellowed, brittle at the creases. But the ink was still clear. Wade could smell the age on it, old paper and candle wax and something else. History, maybe. The smell of things that endure. 1869, Nora said, pointing to the date inscribed in careful script at the top. "The year my father filed his claim. This is the original territorial survey." Wade leaned closer. The map showed the Brennan property in precise detail. Boundary markers, the creek running through the center, and at the top, clearly labeled, "Creek Headwaters, Brennan Claim, 200 yards north of where Gant's new survey placed it." "This is proof," Wade said. "Proof doesn't matter if no one will look at it." Nora's finger traced the creek line on the old map. Her calloused hands looked strange against the delicate paper, rough against fragile. "Gant has the railroad behind him, the bank, the Territorial Land Board. What do we have? An old map and your word," Wade said, "and your father's reputation." Lyle Brennan was known as an honest man from here to Wyoming. Honest men don't win against railroads. Sometimes they do, if they find the right witnesses. Nora looked up at him. Up. The afternoon light came through the window, catching dust motes in its beam. Outside, the windmill squeaked, the same sound it had made 20 years ago when they were children who thought justice was simple and truth always won. "The priest mentioned an old surveyor," Wade said. "Augustus Yates. You know him?" "Gus." Nora's voice went flat. "He drinks at the saloon every night. Hasn't done an honest day's work in years. Why?" "Because Father Dermot thinks he knows something, thinks his conscience is eating him alive. And you think he'll help us." Wade looked at the old map, at the careful way Lyle Brennan had marked every boundary, every water source. A man who'd built something real and expected it to last. "I think," Wade said, "that we're going to find out what Gus Yates knows. And if he had any part in moving those boundary markers, he's going to tell us where the real ones are." Nora folded the map carefully, placed it back in the Bible like scripture, which Wade supposed it was, truth preserved between holy pages. "This is proof," he said again. "Now we find witnesses." The town meeting hall filled early. Wade counted 43 people by the time the Territorial Land Board took their seats behind the long table at the front. Men in work clothes, mostly. A few wives. The air smelled like tobacco and nervous sweat. Nora sat in the third row, Pearl beside her. Wade stood at the back, watching faces, looking for allies, finding none. The Johansson family came in, ranchers from the next valley over. They saw Nora, hesitated, then sat on the opposite side of the room. Mrs. Johansson wouldn't meet Nora's eyes. The blacksmith came in with his two sons. Same thing, saw Nora, sat far away. 3 families walked in together, saw the seating arrangement, turned around and walked back out rather than sit anywhere near the Brennan girl. Pearl's hand found Nora's, squeezed. Let them show their cowardice. God's keeping count. The land board chairman banged his gavel. Thomas Brenner, 60 years old, appointed by the territorial governor, bought and paid for by whoever waved the biggest wallet. His pocket watch sat on the table in front of him. Gold case, railroad engraving, not even trying to hide it. "Meeting's called to order," Brenner said. "We're here to review a boundary dispute between the Brennan Ranch and the Montana and Northern Railroad. Mr. Gant." Silas Gant stood. He'd positioned himself at the front, to Brenner's right, strategic, where everyone could see him, where his expensive suit would catch the lamplight and remind people who had money and who didn't. "Gentlemen, ladies," Gant's voice carried through the hall, confident, practiced. Thank you for your time. I know you're all busy people. I'll make this brief. He unrolled a large map, new paper, crisp edges, the ink so fresh Wade could smell it from 20 feet away. This is a survey conducted by certified railroad surveyors in April of this year, 1889. It shows the true boundaries of various properties in this territory, including the Brennan Ranch. He pinned the map to a board behind him, used brass tacks. Each tap of the hammer echoed in the quiet hall. As you can see, Gant continued, pointing with a wooden rod, the creek headwaters that Miss Brennan believes are on her property are, in fact, located here. He tapped a spot on the map. 200 yards north of her northern boundary, on land granted to the railroad for right-of-way purposes. Someone coughed. The sound was loud in the silence. Boot heels shuffled on the wooden floor. Wade scanned the crowd, looking for Augustus Yates. Found him in the back corner, 67 years old, face like dried leather, hands shaking as he gripped a worn hat. The smell of whiskey came off him even from across the room. His eyes were fixed on Gant's map, his jaw working like he was chewing something bitter. Nora stood. That survey's a lie? The room went quiet. Even the boot shuffling stopped. My father filed his claim in 1869, Nora continued. Her voice didn't shake. 20 years ago, that creek has been on Brennan land since the territorial survey was conducted. I have the original map to prove it. Gant smiled, patient, like she was a child who didn't understand how the world worked. Miss Brennan, I understand your father was a good man, but memory and emotion aren't evidence. Our surveyors use modern equipment, precise measurements, and they found something interesting. He pulled another document from his portfolio. This one was official-looking, territorial seal, multiple signatures. The land Miss Brennan occupies sits atop a significant copper vein. Estimated value, $500,000. The crowd erupted. Whispers became shouts. Men leaned toward each other, voices rising. $500,000. In this territory, that was more money than most of them would see in 10 lifetimes combined. Brenner banged his gavel. Order, order. The noise subsided, but the energy in the room had shifted. Wade felt it. Before, there'd been sympathy, quiet, fearful, but real. Now there was something else. Envy, resentment. How dare the Brennan girls sit on $500,000 while the rest of them scraped by? Gant waited for silence, savoring the moment. The mineral rights to that copper, he said, belong to whoever controls the water source. Because without water, you can't extract ore. And according to our survey, the water source is on railroad land. He paused. Which means the mineral rights, all $500,000 worth, belong to the Montana and Northern Railroad. Nora's face had gone white. You're stealing my land. I'm clarifying ownership, Gant corrected. The law is quite clear. Water rights determine mineral rights, and the water, Miss Brennan, was never yours. That's a damn lie, Wade said from the back. His voice cut through the hall. You moved those boundary markers. Every head turned. Gant's smile didn't waver. That's a serious accusation, Mr. Holloway. Do you have evidence? I have the original 1869 survey. So do we. Gant tapped his new map. And ours is current, yours is 20 years old. Landmarks shift, creek beds change course, weather erodes boundary markers. Our surveyors found the truth. I'm sorry if that truth is inconvenient. Brenner banged his gavel again. The board will take this under advisement. But based on the evidence presented, the railroad's claim appears legitimate. He looked at Nora. Unless you can provide witnesses to dispute Mr. Gant's survey? The room went silent again. Wade watched faces turn away. The Johansson family studied the floor. The blacksmith found something fascinating about his hands. 43 people who'd known Lyle Brennan, who'd drunk his whiskey, who'd borrowed his tools, who'd relied on his help when their own cattle got sick or their fences needed mending. Not one of them spoke. Pearl stood. The only sound was her chair scraping backward. I stand witness, she said. That creek has been on Brennan land since before I came here. Lyle showed me the boundary markers himself, took me to the headwaters. That water belongs to Nora. Gant's smile was pitying now. Miss Washington, I respect your loyalty, but you're not a surveyor. You can't testify to technical boundary measurements. I can testify to what's right and what's stolen. 3 families stood, not to support Nora, to leave. They filed out past Wade, eyes down, moving fast like they were fleeing something contagious. Brenner checked his pocket watch. The gold case caught the lamplight. Unless there are surveyors or legal experts willing to dispute the railroad's findings, this board sees no reason to question their claim. He looked around the room. Anyone? Wade looked at Augustus Yates. The old surveyor was staring at his boots now. His hands had stopped shaking. They were clenched tight around his hat brim, white-knuckled. His mouth moved, words forming and dying before they reached sound. Speak, Wade thought. For the love of God, speak. Gus didn't speak. He turned, walked out. The door closed behind him with a sound like a coffin lid. Then it settled, Brenner said. The board finds in favor of the Montana and Northern Railroad. Miss Brennan has 30 days to vacate the property or accept the railroad's purchase offer of $500. He banged the gavel one final time. Meeting adjourned. The ride back to the ranch was silent. Pearl drove the wagon. Nora sat beside her, staring straight ahead. Wade followed on his bay, watching the dust rise and settle behind them. At the ranch, Nora went straight to the barn. Pearl unhitched the wagon horse with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd done it 10,000 times. Wade tied his bay to the corral rail and waited. She needs a minute, Pearl said quietly. Always does after people show their true colors. How many times has this happened? Every Sunday for the past month? Pearl pulled the harness off, hung it on its peg. Church, town, everywhere she goes. Used to be folks would nod, say hello. Now they cross the street like she's carrying cholera. Wade watched the barn door. No movement inside. Just the sound of horses shifting in their stalls and the windmill's constant squeak. I've got money saved, he said. Not much, but enough to get you somewhere safe. Somewhere you don't have to watch this. Pearl turned to look at him, really look at him. Her eyes were dark and steady and absolutely clear. Mr. Holloway, I was born a slave in Virginia, lived the first 30 years of my life being told I was property. When the war ended, I walked north for 6 months looking for a place that would let me work for wages, for my own name on my own money. She picked up a brush, started working on the wagon horse's coat. The bristles made a rhythmic sound against hide. I found 27 towns before I found Bitterroot. 27 places that said, we don't hire colored. Lyle Brennan was the first white man who looked me in the eye and asked if I knew horses. Not if I knew my place, if I knew horses. The brush strokes continued, steady, patient. When I said yes, he hired me on the spot, paid me same wage as his white hands. When they complained, he fired them, kept me. Said Pearl Washington knows horses better than any man in Montana, and if they had a problem with that, they could work somewhere else. She set down the brush, turned to face Wade fully. So, no, Mr. Holloway, I don't need your money to run. I'm not running. Nora stays, I stay. That girl is closer to a daughter than I'll ever have. And Lyle Brennan gave me something nobody else would, respect. I owe him, I owe her, and I pay my debts. Wade nodded slowly. Fair enough. Besides, Pearl said, and something like a smile touched her face, Lyle taught me things that might help if we're smart about using them. What kind of things? He could find water where other men saw nothing but dust. Had a gift for it. Used a willow fork. You know what that is? Dowsing rod. Water divining. That's right. Old country wisdom. Most folks think it's superstition, but Lyle had the touch. Could find water 300 feet down, blindfolded. Said water calls to certain people. Said it tells the truth even when men lie. Wade felt something click into place. He taught you how? Taught me to feel it. The pull. Like the earth is tugging on your hands, showing you where the water runs. She looked toward the mountains. That survey says the creek source is 200 yards north of where Lyle always said it was. But water don't move because a map says so. If we go up there with a willow fork, the water will tell us who's lying, ganter the ground. That would work in court? Truth is truth, whether a judge believes it or not, but at least we'd know for certain. Pearl picked up a bridle, started checking the leather for cracks. And knowing what's true is half the fight, the other half is finding someone brave enough to say it. Late afternoon, Wade found Nora in the breaking corral. She wasn't working the Mustang, just standing there, leaning against the rail, staring at nothing. Come ride with me, he said. I'm not in the mood for not asking. Asking doesn't work with you. Never did. He opened the corral gate. Get your horse. Something in his voice must have convinced her, or maybe she just needed to move. She saddled her mare, a blue roan with good legs and patient eyes. They rode north, toward the disputed land. The creek ran clear and cold through a narrow valley. Cottonwoods grew along the banks, their leaves rustling in the wind that came down from the high country. The smell of water and green growing things, the sound of current over stones. This was the heart of the ranch, the source that made everything else possible. They followed the creek upstream. The land rose gradually. Rocks became more frequent. The cottonwoods gave way to aspen and pine. "My father brought me up here when I was 7, Nora said. Her first words in an hour. Showed me where the water came from. Said a ranch without water is just dust and wishful thinking. Said as long as we had this creek, we'd be all right." He was a smart man. Smart men don't die with their life's work in debt. Smart men take risks for people they love. Wade reined his horse to a stop, pointed upstream. How much further to the source? Maybe half a mile. There's a rock face. Water comes out of a crack in the granite. Lyle found it when he was prospecting. That's why he filed his claim here. Knew the water was permanent, year-round flow. Wade studied the terrain, looking for signs of recent activity. Fresh tracks, disturbed earth. Anything that would prove someone had been up here moving boundary markers. "Tomorrow," he said, "we're coming back. Pearl, you, me. We're going to find those original survey stakes. And if they've been moved, we're going to prove it." How? "Pearl says your father could divine water, that the earth tells the truth if you know how to listen." Nora smiled, small and sad. "He tried to teach me, said I didn't have the patience for it. Too quick to judgment, needed to quiet my mind and feel instead of think. Maybe it's time to try again." They sat there on their horses, watching the creek flow past. The sun was dropping toward the western mountains, turning the sky copper and gold. Somewhere a hawk called. The sound echoed off the rock faces. "If we lose this fight," Nora said quietly, "at least I'll know someone tried." Wade looked at her, really looked at her. The woman she'd become. Stronger than the girl he'd left behind. Harder, but still her, still Nora. "We won't lose," he said. "Not if that surveyor's conscience is as heavy as the priest says." They waited until full dark. No moon, just stars scattered thick across the Montana sky, like spilled salt. Wade, Nora, and Pearl rode north with a single lantern shuttered down to a sliver of light. The horses picked their way carefully over the rocky ground. The night smelled like pine resin and cold mountain air, the kind of cold that came down from high country, carrying the promise of winter even in summer. "There," Nora whispered, pointing to a rise ahead. "That's where the boundary should be, where my father's survey stakes were placed." They dismounted. Wade took the lantern, opened the shutter just enough to see the ground. Pearl kept watch, her eyes scanning the darkness for movement, for witnesses, for anyone who might ask what they were doing on disputed land after dark. The earth looked wrong. Even in the dim light, Wade could see it. A patch of ground maybe 10 feet across where the dirt was looser, darker. Disturbed recently, within the last year or two. Around it, the native grasses grew thick and undisturbed. But here, new grass was struggling to take hold. Wade knelt, ran his hand over the ground. The soil was loose, crumbly, easy to dig. He pulled his knife, used it to scrape away the top layer, something hard. Wood. He dug carefully with his hands now. The smell of fresh earth rose up, the kind of earth that's been turned and settled but not long enough to compact solid again. His fingers found it. A piece of wood, splintered, broken deliberately. He pulled it free, held it up to the lantern light. A survey stake. Old pine, weathered gray, and carved into the wood, still visible despite the years, 1869. "Jesus," Pearl breathed. Nora took the stake with trembling hands. Her fingers traced the carved numbers. "This was one of my father's original markers." "Broken and buried?" Wade said. He kept digging, found 2 more pieces, both carved with the same date, both broken at the base where they'd been pulled from the ground. "They moved the boundary," Nora said. Her voice was hollow, stating a fact that was somehow both obvious and impossible to believe. "They pulled my father's stakes and moved the line 200 yards north." Wade stood, brushed the dirt from his hands, looked around the area with the lantern, found what he was looking for, wagon tracks, not old, recent enough that the grass was still flattened in places, the wheel ruts still visible in softer soil. "Heavy wagon," he said. 4 horses, maybe 5. Came up here, did their work, went back down. "When?" Nora asked. "Last year sometime. Before winter, the tracks would be gone otherwise." He followed them with the lantern for 20 yards. They led back toward town, toward the railroad office. Pearl touched his arm. "Someone's coming." Wade shuddered the lantern immediately. Darkness swallowed them. He heard it now. Footsteps, unsteady, someone walking in the dark without a light, stumbling occasionally. The sound of a man who'd had too much to drink trying to navigate rough terrain. They waited, silent. hands on their horses' noses to keep them quiet. A figure appeared against the starlight, thin, bent, moving with the careful uncertainty of the very drunk. "Gus," Wade said quietly. The old surveyor stopped, swayed. "Who's there?" "Wade Holloway, with Nora Brennan and Pearl Washington. We found your stakes, Gus, the ones you moved." Silence. Just the wind through the pines and the distant sound of water over rocks. "Go away," Gus said finally. His voice was slurred, but there was something else underneath. Fear. "You don't know what you're dealing with." "Then tell us." "Can't. They'll kill me. They'll—" He stumbled, caught himself against a rock. Wade opened the lantern enough to see him. Augustus Yates looked 20 years older than he had at the town meeting. His face was gray, his hands shook so badly he could barely grip the rock. "They already killed you," Wade said. "The drinking's just taking longer." Father Dermot's church tent was dark, except for a single candle burning at the makeshift altar. The priest was still there, keeping vigil. He looked up when they brought Gus through the entrance. Didn't seem surprised. "Augustus," he said gently, "come sit." They settled Gus on the front bench. He was shaking worse now, the whiskey wearing off and something else rising up to replace it. Pearl went to get water. Wade and Nora stood back, letting the priest work. "Tell them," Father Dermot said. "Tell them what you told me in confession. The seal is sacred, but you can break your own seal. You can speak your own truth." Gus's hands twisted his hat into a wreck. The brim crumpled under his fingers. He smelled like whiskey and sweat and something sour, the smell of a man rotting from the inside out. "I moved 4 ranch markers," he said finally, words tumbling out like he'd been holding them behind a dam. 4 ranches in this territory, for the railroad, $200 per job." "Why?" Nora's voice was barely a whisper. "Copper, silver, water rights, whatever the railroad wanted." Gus looked up at her. His eyes were wet, red-rimmed. "Your ranch was the last one. April of '87. They told me where to move the boundary. Told me to make it look official. I did what they paid me to do." "Where are the original stakes?" Wade asked. "Broke them. Buried them." Gus wiped his face. His hand came away wet. "Made new ones. Carved 1889 on them, even though I placed them in '87. Made it look like a recent survey finding old discrepancies." "The cairn," Pearl said. "The stone pile marking the true creek source. What happened to that?" Gus shook his head. "Never touched it. The cairn was too high, too visible. Didn't need to, just moved the lower stakes. That was enough to shift the water rights on paper." Wade felt something click. "So the original cairn is still up there?" 220 yards north of Gant's marker, maybe more. There was a rock slide last winter. Might be buried now, but it's there. The real source point." Gus pulled a folded paper from inside his coat. His hands shook as he held it out. "My original notes, from when I did the real survey in '87, before they paid me to change it." The paper was yellowed, folded and refolded so many times the creases were splitting. Wade opened it carefully. Survey notes in Gus's hand, dated 1887, showing measurements that matched Lyle's 1869 map exactly. "Why keep these?" Wade asked. "Insurance. Thought maybe if they ever came after me, I'd have proof I was just following orders." "Stupid." Gus laughed, bitter. "You can't insure against your own conscience." Father Dermot's hand rested on Gus's shoulder. "You're doing the right thing now, Augustus. That's what matters." "The right thing." Gus looked at Nora. "Your father was kind to me. When my wife died, he brought food, sat with me. Didn't have to. Most men wouldn't have." His voice broke. "And I stole from him, from you, for $200 goddamn dollars." "How many others?" Wade asked. "You said 4 ranches. The Johansson place. The old Kellerman Ranch, railroad owns that now. The Morrison spread west of town, and Brennan's." Gus wiped his face again. "All moved between '85 and '87, all for the same reason. Railroad found mineral deposits, wanted the land, needed the water rights to get it." "Will you testify?" Wade asked. The shaking got worse. Gus's whole body trembled. "They'll kill me. They'll kill Nora's legacy if you don't." Silence. Just the candle flame flickering and the sound of Gus's ragged breathing. "I'll testify," he whispered finally. "God help me. I'll testify." Morning came cold. Wade woke to the sound of someone pounding on the church tent pole. He'd slept on a bench, keeping watch over Gus. Father Dermot had insisted the old surveyor stay where he wouldn't run, where his courage wouldn't leak out with the sunrise. But when Wade sat up, rubbing sleep from his eyes, Gus was already awake, sober, and terrified. I can't do this, Gus said. His voice was clear now. No whiskey slur, just raw fear. I can't testify. They'll kill me. Father Dermot was at the altar preparing for morning mass. He turned at Gus's words. His face was patient but firm, the face of a man who'd heard every excuse and rationalization the human soul could manufacture. You gave your word last night, Augustus. I was drunk. You were honest. The priest walked toward them. His boots made hollow sounds on the wooden planks laid over bare earth. The whiskey stripped away your lies, that's all. Gus stood. His legs were shaky, but he managed to stay upright. You don't understand. Gant has men, railroad men. They don't just fire you. They make sure you never work again, never eat again, never sleep again? Father Dermot's voice was soft. Tell me, Augustus, when's the last time you slept through the night? Really slept, without whiskey, without nightmares. Gus's hands started shaking again. He shoved them in his pockets. That's different. Is it? The priest moved closer. The smell of incense clung to his vestments, sweet and smoky. You can die with a lie, Augustus, but you'll die twice. Once in body, once in soul, and the second death, that one's already started. Wade stood. They'll kill Nora's legacy if you don't speak. Better her legacy than my life. Gus turned toward the tent entrance. Daylight was bleeding through the canvas, turning everything gray and uncertain. Is it? Wade asked. Because from where I stand, you're already dead. Walking, talking, but dead inside. That's what guilt does. It kills you slow, one bottle at a time. Gus stopped. His back was to them, his shoulders hunched like he was carrying weight visible only to him. I have the original survey notes, Wade continued. Your notes, the ones you kept because somewhere deep down you knew this day would come, knew you'd have to choose between living afraid or dying honest. You don't know what you're asking. I'm not asking. Wade walked around to face him. I'm telling you, tomorrow morning we're riding up to that creek source. We're finding that cairn, and then we're taking it all to the territorial judge. Your notes, the moved stakes, the physical proof, with or without your testimony. But with it, we win. Without it, we might still win, but you'll still be drowning in whiskey, wondering when the next Nora Brennan walks through your nightmares. Father Dermot's hand rested on Gus's shoulder. The gesture was gentle, paternal. Dying is easy, Augustus. Living with honor? That takes courage. But redemption is possible, even now, even after everything. Gus's hands came out of his pockets, still shaking. He looked at them like they belonged to someone else. If I do this, he whispered, if I testify, I'm a dead man. If you don't, the priest said quietly, you already are. The saloon was empty except for the bartender wiping glasses and two old miners nursing beers at a corner table. Wade sat at the bar, drinking coffee that tasted like it had been boiled with boot leather. The afternoon sun came through the dirty windows and dusty shafts. The door opened. Wade knew who it was before he turned, could feel the shift in the room, the way the bartender's hand stopped moving, the way the miner's conversation died mid-sentence. Silas Gant walked to the bar, sat 2 stools down from Wade. His suit was immaculate, his boots polished to a mirror shine. The smell of expensive cologne mixed with the saloon's usual reek of stale beer and tobacco. Mr. Holloway, Gant said pleasantly, enjoying our fine Bitterroot hospitality. Depends on your definition of hospitality. Gant smiled, gestured to the bartender for whiskey. When it came, he didn't drink it, just turned the glass in circles on the scarred bar top. The sound of glass on wood was rhythmic, hypnotic. I'm a reasonable man, Gant said. A businessman. I understand you have feelings for Miss Brennan. Childhood attachment. Very touching, very romantic. He pushed an envelope across the bar toward Wade. $10,000, bank draft, good anywhere in the territory, more than enough to start over somewhere else. Maybe take the girl with you, build a new life. Leave the past behind where it belongs. Wade looked at the envelope, didn't touch it. That's your play? Buy me off? It's an offer, a generous one. Considerably more than your $3,000. Considerably more than the ranch is worth, frankly. And if I say no? Gant's smile thinned. He leaned closer. The cologne smell got stronger, trying to cover something underneath. Sweat, fear. The railroad man wasn't as confident as he pretended. Then things get difficult, Gant said quietly. For you, for the girl. Accidents happen on isolated ranches, fires, equipment failures. People get hurt. Sometimes they don't recover. Wade's hand moved to his belt, not for a gun, still wasn't wearing one, but his fingers found the smooth wood handle of his father's branding iron tucked through his belt where it had been since the night investigation. He'd been carrying it, a reminder, a promise. He pulled it out, set it on the bar between them. The LH mark was visible, worn smooth from years of honest use. My father used this iron for 30 years, Wade said. Never once branded another man's calf, never once claimed what wasn't his. He taught me a brand is a man's word made permanent. He picked up Gant's envelope. Thick paper, quality stock, the kind that costs money. Wade held it over the bar, touched the corner to the candle burning near the cash register. The paper caught immediately. Flames crawled up the envelope, bright and hungry. The smell of burning paper and ink filled the air, acrid and final. He let it burn until the heat touched his fingers, then dropped it on the bar. The flames consumed the bank draft, turning $10,000 into ash and smoke. Gant's face had gone white, then red. "You're making a mistake." Wade picked up the branding iron, pressed the LH mark into the charred remains of the envelope. The hot metal hissed, smoke rose, the wood of the bar scorched, leaving a permanent brand. "A man's word ain't for sale," Wade said. "Not for 10,000, not for 100,000. My father taught me that. Your mistake was thinking I forgot." He stood, tucked the branding iron back in his belt, started for the door. "That woman will die on that ranch," Gant called after him. His voice was tight now, angry, the businessman mask slipping. "And when she does, her blood's on your hands, not mine." Wade stopped at the door, looked back. "No. When she keeps that ranch and you're in a territorial prison for fraud, you remember this moment. Remember I gave you a chance to walk away clean. You chose different." He walked out into the afternoon sun. Behind him, smoke still curled up from the burned envelope and the brand mark scorched into the bar. The bartender stared at the mark, at Gant. "Want me to send for the sheriff?" he asked quietly. Gant stood. His hands were shaking now, just slightly. Enough to notice. "No, just get me another whiskey, a bottle." They rode out at first light. Wade, Nora, Pearl, and Gus. 4 riders heading up into the high country where the creek was born. The morning air was thin and cold. The horse's breath came out in clouds that hung in the still air before dissolving. Pearl carried a willow branch she'd cut from the creek bank, Y-shaped, fresh, the bark still green and damp under her fingers. "Lyle taught me this when I first came to work for him," she said, holding the fork up. "Said some folks are born with the touch. Said water calls to them if they quiet their minds enough to listen." They followed the creek upstream, past the point where Gant's survey claimed the source should be. The water kept flowing, clear and cold and constant. 200 yards north, Gus said. His voice was steady this morning, sober, determined, like a man who'd made peace with whatever came next. "Maybe a bit more. There was a big rock slide last winter, might have buried it." The terrain got rougher. Boulders the size of wagons, loose scree that made the horses pick their way carefully. The smell of pine resin and granite dust. The sound of water somewhere ahead, not loud, but persistent, calling. Pearl dismounted, held the willow fork out in front of her, one branch in each hand, started walking. Her eyes were half closed, concentrating. "What's she doing?" Gus asked. "Listening," Nora said, "like my father taught her." Pearl walked slowly. The willow fork held steady at first, then it started to tremble, just slightly, like something was pulling at it from underneath. She changed direction, walked toward a tumbled mass of boulders. The fork pulled harder. Her hands tightened on the branches, but the tips still bent downward, pointing. "Here," she said. "Water's here. Strong, deep. This is the source." They dismounted, started moving rocks. Some were too big for human hands. They used ropes tied to saddle horns, horses straining to drag boulders aside. The smell of disturbed earth and cold stone. The scrape of rock on rock echoing off the surrounding cliffs. Wade's hands found it first. Stone piled deliberately, not natural, human-made, a cairn. They cleared it carefully, rock by rock, building up the pile beside them as they dug down, and there, at the base, protected by the weight of stone above it, a carved marker. Wade pulled it free, granite, heavy. The carving was weathered but clear, Brennan claim, creek source, 1869. Nora's breath caught. Her hand touched the stone like it was holy, like it was her father's voice speaking across 20 years of silence. "This is it," Wade said. "The proof, the real boundary." He pulled the branding iron from his belt. Set it against the largest stone of the restored cairn. Press down. The hot metal, heated over their small fire that morning, scorched into the granite. Smoke rose, the smell of burned rock. When he lifted it, the LH mark was clear and permanent, branded into stone, ended. Truth made permanent. Now let's see Gant argue with granite, Wade said. The land office was packed. Word had spread somehow, the way word always spreads in small towns. Something was happening, something that might shift the balance of power. People came to watch. Judge Morrison sat behind the land commissioner's desk. 70 years old, appointed by the territorial governor. He'd presided over more land disputes than any man in Montana. His face was carved from the same granite as the mountains, hard, weathered, showing nothing. Gant stood to one side, his lawyer beside him, both men confident. Calm, they had the new survey, the land board's previous ruling, the weight of the railroad behind them. Wade, Nora, and Pearl stood opposite, Gus between them and the judge. The old surveyor's hands were steady now, resting on a leather portfolio that held his original notes. "This hearing will come to order," Judge Morrison said. His voice was gravel and authority. "Mr. Gant, you've petitioned this court to uphold the land board's previous ruling regarding the Brennan Ranch boundary dispute. State your case." Gant stepped forward. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. A recent survey conducted by certified railroad surveyors found discrepancies in the original 1869 territorial survey. The creek headwaters, and thus the water rights, are located outside Miss Brennan's property boundaries. Our documentation is thorough and conclusive." He laid out his map, fresh and clean and official-looking, the ink still sharp. "Mr. Holloway," the judge said, "you've filed a counter-petition. What evidence do you present?" Wade approached, set the original 1869 map on the desk. The paper was yellow, water-stained, fragile, but the ink was clear, the measurements precise. "This is Lyle Brennan's original survey from 1869. It shows the creek headwaters clearly within his property boundaries, 220 yards south of where Mr. Gant claims they are." Gant's lawyer smiled, condescending. "Your Honor, this map is 20 years old. Landmarks shift. Creek beds change course. Our modern survey isn't worth the paper it's drawn on," Wade interrupted. "Because it's a lie, and we can prove it." He pulled out the broken survey stakes, the pieces of wood with 1869 carved into them, set them on the desk one by one. The sound of wood on wood echoed in the quiet room. "These are the original boundary markers, found buried 200 yards south of Mr. Gant's current survey line, broken deliberately, hidden." Murmuring ran through the crowd. The judge raised his hand for silence. "That proves nothing," Gant said. His voice was tight now. "Old stakes could have been moved by weather, by animals, by Augustus Yates," Wade said. "On April 12, 1887, for $200, paid by the Montana and Northern Railroad." Gus stepped forward. His hands were steady on his portfolio. He opened it, pulled out his original survey notes. 20 years of guilt-made paper. "I moved those markers," Gus said. His voice carried through the room, clear, strong, the voice of a man who'd finally stopped running. "I was hired by the railroad to falsify boundary surveys on 4 ranches in this territory. The Brennan Ranch was one of them. I moved the markers to shift water rights onto railroad land, made it look official, made it look legal, but it was fraud." The room erupted, voices rising. Gant's face went white, then red. His lawyer grabbed his arm, whispered urgently. Judge Morrison's gavel cracked like thunder. "Order! I will have order!" Silence fell, tense, electric. "Mr. Yates," the judge said quietly, "you understand the implications of this testimony. You're admitting to criminal fraud." "Yes, sir." Gus's hands didn't shake. "I am, and I'm prepared to face the consequences. But I won't let an innocent woman lose her father's legacy because I was a coward and a thief." The judge looked at the evidence spread before him. Old map, new map, broken stakes, survey notes. His face revealed nothing. "Is there physical proof?" he asked. "The original boundary marker. Does it still exist?" Wade pulled out a photograph. Pearl had taken it that morning with the box camera she kept for recording horses. The cairn, the carved stone, the LH brand burned clear and permanent into granite. "The original cairn marking the true creek source," Wade said. "Still standing, 220 yards north of Mr. Gant's survey line. The water flows from there, not from where his map claims. Water doesn't lie, Your Honor, even when men do." Judge Morrison studied the photograph for a long moment, then looked at Gant. "Mr. Gant, do you wish to dispute Mr. Yates's testimony?" Gant's jaw worked. His hands were fists at his sides. "That man is a drunk, a liar. His testimony is backed by physical evidence," the judge interrupted. Original survey notes. Broken stakes with dates matching the original survey, a cairn marker still in place, and a rather convenient new survey that happens to shift water rights onto land containing valuable mineral deposits. He leaned back. "I've seen fraud before, Mr. Gant. It usually dresses itself up in expensive suits and talks about modern techniques and progress." He picked up his gavel. "I hereby nullify the 1889 survey as fraudulent. The original 1869 Brennan property boundaries are reinstated. Water rights remain with Miss Brennan. Furthermore, the Montana and Northern Railroad will pay damages in the amount of $8,000 for attempted land theft plus court costs." The gavel fell. Final, absolute. "Mr. Gant, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud. Sheriff?" The sheriff, who'd been standing quietly at the back, moved forward. The crowd parted. Gant's lawyer was already heading for the door. "This isn't over," Gant hissed as the cuffs went on. "The railroad has attorneys. Appeals. You haven't won anything." Wade stepped close enough to smell the fierce sweat under Gant's cologne. "The railroad has attorneys," Wade said quietly. "But now we have 3 other ranchers who'll testify you stole their land too. How many attorneys you think it takes to fight 4 fraud cases? How long you think the railroad stands by a man who gets caught?" Gant's face crumbled, the mask finally breaking. He looked old suddenly, fragile, just a man who'd made bad choices and run out of places to hide. The sheriff let him out. The crowd buzzed. 3 men, ranchers Wade didn't know, pushed through to the front. "Mr. Holloway," one of them said. "I'm Eric Johansson. My boundary was moved too, in '85. Can we talk?" The paperwork took 3 hours. Judge Morrison was meticulous. Every signature witnessed, every document sealed with the territorial stamp. The railroad's $8,000 was transferred to Nora's name by bank draft. The original loan of $3,000 was marked paid in full. The deed to the Brennan Ranch was returned to her hands with no liens, no claims, no shadows hanging over it. Wade's $3,000 in gold eagles sat in canvas sacks on the judge's desk, unclaimed, unneeded. The judge looked at Wade, then at Nora. "This money was offered in good faith," Morrison said, "for a debt that no longer exists. What would you have me do with it?" Wade looked at Nora. She looked at him. Something passed between them, an understanding that didn't need words. "Give it to Gus Yates," Wade said. "He'll need a lawyer, and money to start over once he's served whatever time you give him." Gus, sitting in the corner under the sheriff's watch, looked up sharply. His eyes were red, exhausted. But something like hope flickered there. "Mr. Yates committed fraud," the judge said. "But he also exposed a conspiracy that would have stolen 4 ranches and maybe more. I'll take that into account." He made a note in his ledger. 30 days in the territorial jail, plus restitution work for the families affected. After that, this money is his, to do better than he did before. Gus's head dropped. His shoulders shook. The sound he made might have been a sob or a laugh or both. Outside, the afternoon sun was bright and clean. The air smelled like rain coming. Thunderheads building over the mountains promising to break the dry spell. The town square was crowded. People who'd stayed silent at the town meeting were suddenly finding their voices. Eric Johansson approached with his 2 sons. "Mr. Holloway, Miss Brennan, we owe you an apology, and our gratitude. The judge says we can file our claim now, get our land back." 2 other ranchers came forward, men whose names Wade didn't know but whose faces carried the same story, relief mixed with shame. They'd stood silent when Nora needed them. Now they wanted to make it right. "Your father was a good man, Miss Brennan," one of them said. "Lyle helped me when my cattle got sick back in '82. Wouldn't take payment. Said neighbors don't charge neighbors for being decent." He twisted his hat in his hands. "I should have stood with you. I'm sorry." Nora's voice was steady. "You're standing now. That's what matters." Pearl stood beside her, arms crossed, watching the crowd with eyes that missed nothing. When the apologies were done, she leaned close to Nora and whispered something that made Nora smile. The first real smile Wade had seen on her face in weeks. The crowd parted. Father Dermot walked through, his worn Bible under one arm. He looked at Wade and Nora with the satisfaction of a man who'd seen his prayers answered. "Well done," he said simply. "Both of you. And Augustus, redemption is a long road, but he's taken the first step." Wade felt Nora's hand find his. Her fingers laced through his fingers. Work roughened palm against work roughened palm. They fit together like they'd been carved from the same wood. Your father would be proud, Wade said quietly. So am I. Nora turned to him, stood on her toes, and kissed him, right there in the middle of the town square with 40 witnesses watching. When she pulled back, her eyes were wet, but she was smiling. Took you 20 years, she said. But I reckon you kept your promise after all. 2 weeks later, they stood at the creek source. The cairn was rebuilt, stones stacked solid and true, the carved marker at its base, the LH brand burned clear and permanent into granite. A brass plaque had been added, hammered in by the blacksmith who'd finally found his courage. Lyle Brennan, 1869. Truth restored, 1889. Father Dermot stood in his vestments, Pearl beside him, holding wild roses she'd picked from along the creek bank. Gus was there too, released that morning, clean-shaven for the first time in years, his hands steady as he held his worn hat. The morning was clear. Cold water ran over stones with a sound like music. Aspens whispered in the wind that came down from the high country, the smell of pine and granite and growing things. Wade held Nora's hands. His mother's ring, carried for 20 years, waiting, slid onto her fingers smooth and certain as water finding its course. I, Wade, take you, Nora, to be my wife, he said. The traditional words, the old promises. For richer or poorer, in sickness and health, till death parts us. I, Nora, take you, Wade, to be my husband. Her voice didn't shake. For better or worse, for richer or poorer, till death parts us. Father Dermot blessed them with words older than Montana, older than America, older than memory. He dipped his fingers in the creek water, cold and clear and honest, and marked their foreheads with it. What God has joined, let no man put asunder. Pearl was crying, trying to hide it and failing. Gus stood with his head bowed, lips moving in silent prayer or apology or both. They kissed as husband and wife. The creek sang, the aspens whispered, and somewhere high above, a hawk called, the sound echoing off the same rocks that had witnessed Lyle Brennan's original claim 20 years before. 3 years later, 2 children played at the base of the cairn. A boy of 2 and a girl, barely walking. They looked like both their parents. The boy had Wade's storm gray eyes. The girl had Nora's determination already showing in the set of her jaw. Pearl watched them from nearby, sitting on a boulder in the sun, her face peaceful. She was teaching them to listen to the water the way Lyle had taught her, to hear truth in the way it flowed. Wade and Nora stood hand in hand on the rise above, watching their children discover the source of everything their family had fought for. Think they'll understand someday? Nora asked. What this place cost, what it means. They will, Wade said, when they're ready, when they have something worth fighting for themselves. The boy, they'd named him Lyle, picked up a rock, carried it carefully to the cairn, added it to the pile, building on what came before, making it stronger. The girl, Mary, after Nora's mother, laughed and clapped her hands at the sound the stone made. Wade pulled out his pocket knife, knelt by the cairn. Below the brass plaque, below the carved marker, below his father's branded LH mark, he carved carefully, WH plus NBBH, 1889, promise kept. The sound of metal on stone, the smell of granite dust, the feel of Nora's hand on his shoulder as he worked. When he finished, she knelt beside him, added her own line below his, for our children and theirs. The creek flowed on, constant, honest, telling the truth it had always told, waiting for people brave enough to listen. Now, some folks say Wade Holloway came back for love. Others say he came back for justice. The way I see it, he came back because a promise is a promise, and a man's word is the only thing that outlasts him. 20 years is a long time to wait. Long enough for children to grow old, long enough for the young to forget what honor means. But some things, land, water, a woman's trust, can't be rushed. Wade knew that. Lyle knew that before him. And now their children know it too, playing by that old stone cairn where truth wouldn't stay buried. The railroad tried to steal 4 ranches in Montana Territory, got caught on the 4th. Silas Gant served 5 years in territorial prison. When he got out, the railroad wouldn't touch him. Last anyone heard, he was selling insurance in Denver, living small, living ashamed. Augustus Yates stayed sober after his 30 days, spent the rest of his years doing honest survey work, fixing what he'd broken where he could. Died in his sleep at 73, Father Dermot beside him. They say his last words were, "The water don't lie." Pearl Washington taught 3 generations of Montana ranchers how to break horses gentle and find water where others saw dust. Lived to 91. Got buried on the Holloway Ranch with a headstone that read, "Family." Simple as that. The Brennan Ranch, Holloway Ranch, by then, stayed in the family. Still there today, if you know where to look. Creek still flows clear and cold from that granite crack. Cairn still stands with all those names carved on it, promise kept, truth restored. Because some promises define who you are. And keeping them, that's what separates men from boys, ranches from dust, and water from lies. The land remembers, water flows, truth endures, always has, always will.